Oh, come on, Vincenzo, just play the intro. It's the last show for this year. Let's just get this show on the road and wrap it all up.
From Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the Sandton Times Hour.
With your host,
Alexander.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, one last time for 2024. Everyone in between and beyond, this is the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 184, week 49, the last show for this year. And as always, if you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @Sandton Times or visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And don't forget that the Sandton Times Hour is available on all leading digital audio channels wherever you are in the world. A very special welcome to everyone listening for the very first time. If that's you, well, welcome. December is a great time to catch up on the show, so good on you for doing that. If you're in Johannesburg or Pretoria and you're a regular listener, welcome to you. Of course, also across South Africa and everywhere else in the world, wherever you are, I'm happy to report that all is well in Santonland. And Vincenzo joins me behind the mixing desk one more time. And yes, it's the final show for the year. And it's a podcast exclusive. So if you know the show, it usually goes out on radio every Monday night and then gets released as a podcast straight after that. And this week, us podcast listeners are all on our own. The station has been moving. They've been changing over to a different system. There's been a couple of technical issues, some things we've had to do. And I said, well, you know what? Let's wrap this up properly. Let's at least do one more show, even if it is a podcast exclusive. So Vincenzo and I got into our flip-flops, into our shorts, into our t-shirts, because it is so unbelievably hot, and said, listen, let's get behind the mic. Let's do one more show for the fans and make sure that we finish off the year strong. So who are we talking to this week? Well, in a bit, I'll be chatting to a lady who will be talking to me about all things cruising, for those of you wanting to take to the seas and see the world in luxury. Then after that, I catch up with a hot South African music legend for his latest show, which is happening right here in Sandton, just to close off the year. And finally, I'm going to wrap up the year 2024 for the Sandton Times Hour, just for you. All this and more in the next hour.
Show some love.
subscribe, share,
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour
on your favorite podcast app now.
The best of Sandton and beyond.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So one of the topics that the Sandton Times has championed over the past 2 years is the growing popularity of cruising in South Africa. And here to chat to me about this topic, because as I said, this is a topic that we've really enjoyed talking about, we've been exploring extensively, is Gaynor Galbraith Neill. She's the owner and CEO of Cruise Vacations, which is a leading boutique travel agency based in Bryanston, which has walked away with 2 victories this year. And one of them is Africa's Best Cruise Travel Agency, which they've gotten for a 3rd year in a row, as well as a 2nd award, which they took, which is the title of World's Best Cruise Travel Agency for 2024 at the World Cruise Awards. So Gaynor, without anything else, congratulations to you and your team on these great accolades.
Thank you so much. We are exceptionally proud, if not a bit bemused, but we're very, very proud, especially to bring awards like that back to South Africa. I hope it's encouraging for other people. So yes, we're thrilled. Thank you so much.
Well, before we get chatting about cruising, and also we're going to focus on people who've never been on a cruise before, because I think that's always the interesting audience who are always sort of sitting on the edge, deciding should they do it, shouldn't they do it. Let's get into your business first, Cruise Vacations. How long have you been doing it for? How did you get into this business? What made you decide to send people off into the world and put them on ships and get them to explore the world from the waters?
Well, funnily enough, next year I celebrate a personal anniversary in cruising, which is my 30th year
Wow.
of working in the cruise industry. Actually, when we started representing one of our cruise lines, Silver Sea Cruises, I was very fortunate. In those days, we were under the Starlight Cruises banner, which a lot of people might be familiar with. And then in 2010, Starlight became MSC Cruises, and we set up cruise vacations. So we've been doing cruise vacations since 2010. I took over full ownership of it in 2020. I don't need to tell you what the world of cruising was like back in 2020, but 4 years later, we've come out the other side. And one of our greatest challenges really is the fact that people, cruise is a very generic term. And a lot of people have a perception of cruising, these large resort, thousands of passengers. And our job largely is to try and persuade people that, there's lots of genres to cruising. There's lots of aspects. We in particular, we specialize in luxury, niche and expedition cruising. So very immersive, very experiential, smaller ships, not thousands of passengers, rather hundreds. Funnily enough, this year we've seen huge growth in first-time cruises, which is great because I think people are coming around to the idea that it isn't, or should I say that there are different types of cruise products in this huge market to select from. So that's sort of a background to what we do and how long we've been doing it for.
Well, I think you've touched on a lot of things that we're going to unpack in this interview, and I think I'm going to try and decide which part of this cake we're going to start biting off first. But let's just chat about the story about the South African cruise market evolving, growing. I mean, you've got a 30-year outlook now, and let's take COVID out of it because obviously that was sort of a bit of a blip on the radar in terms of growth and popularity. But have you seen cruising in South Africa on the increase? And when I say cruising in South Africa, obviously we've had a very long legacy with MSC Cruises sort of doing 3-4 nights to nowhere or to Mozambique or around the coast, etc., etc. And I kind of want to take that out of the equation because I think that's also a very different kind of cruise product and a very different market. If we look at cruising on a global scale, are South Africans more inclined or is there a growing market of South Africans going overseas and deciding, well, we're going to go to the Mediterranean, the Bahamas, Southeast Asia, but we're going to do it on a ship?
Yes, there definitely is. And you make a very good point. We have a very an excellent South African cruise program. As you say, it's a different style of cruising altogether. And I think what people are realizing is that, I always look at it and think when you go away on holiday anywhere or you travel, people tend to levitate towards water. They want to do a catamaran cruise or a cruise, or there's quite often an aspect of that. Now, on a ship, there's places that you can reach in the world that you otherwise couldn't. That's one of the benefits. And like I said before, you've got to look at your different style. We say to our travel agents we work with, profile your client. What are their interests? Where do they want to go? That helps us sort of guide them with the product. But they definitely, in answer to your question, significant growth from this market, which is great to see. I don't know the actual statistics, but there is significant growth. I can tell just from our own activity this year in all styles of cruising, but outbound from South Africa. So a lot more passengers are traveling overseas. The Med is a particularly popular destination because that's winter sun for us. So it's a very popular season, but also the expedition market has grown extensively this year as well. So yes, there's the short answer to your question is yes, there's definitely, we notice significant growth in outbound passengers cruising around the world.
And I think you framed it quite nicely as well, because we're talking about a very specific segment of the cruise market. Like you mentioned, there's obviously the big resort type ships, and we've obviously done a lot of interviews and a lot of conversations with Norwegian Cruise Lines over the last 12 months, also because they've just been very good at communicating and engaging with the Sandton Times on what they're doing, how they're doing it, and that appeals to a very, very specific market. Maybe it's families with kids, or if you want to have something that's a little bit more the ship, where the ship is the attraction and not just the ports that you're going to. But you're focusing very much on a very premium luxury space. I know you look after Emerald Cruises, Scenic Yachts, Emerald Yachts, Star Clippers. I mean, you've got a very interesting portfolio, and to see that market, which is not necessarily a value for money proposition or I'm getting a great deal, let me go on an expedition to the Antarctic. That is a market that is very much paying for a once-in-a-lifetime experience?
I can hear just chatting to you, you really do have a handle on cruising. NCL, as you point out, is a great product, and it has its own market in that space, in that sort of larger cruise and family sort of premium space. What we do is very much the boutique is a word I like to use. Smaller, less passengers. What I've seen in the evolution in the time that I've worked in it is this wonderful integration between what we call the hardware and the software, the hardware being the ship and the software being the destinations. These cruises, they curate experiences. So they sort of have a ship and shore integration, if that makes sense, that your entire experience. So that will, as an example, culinary experiences, they will translate on board in terms of the destination that you're visiting. So Silversea have got a wonderful program on their classic vessels called Sea and Land Taste, SALT program. And that is where, let's say, for example, you're in the Greek islands, they will take you off on an excursion to, a specialist restaurant or farm or winery. They have a restaurant on board that will, if you're in Mykonos that night on board, it will be a Mykonoan menu that you eat from. You have cooking classes on board with experienced chefs. So they put a big focus on culinary. There's definitely sort of an integration of ship and shore. So your entire experience is very, very immersive, is the word that they're using a lot these days. It's a different style, this boutique. We do the rivers of Europe as well. Beautiful luxury, all-inclusive on the rivers. A yacht product. We've got the sail ships of Star Clippers. So we've got a lot of sort of niche product. But yes, very much a sort of different, more immersive, and depending on your interest levels, there's something that we'll find, whether it's the destination or the activity. There's culinary experiences, art, history, active, a lot of wildlife focus, obviously, on the expedition products. So it's definitely it's a wonderful way to travel, and it's a wonderful way to see the world.
Well, I'm in conversation with Gaynor Galbraith Neill. She's the owner and CEO of Cruise Vacations, an award-winning boutique travel agency based here in Bryanston, about getting on a cruise, chatting about cruising, if you're a first-timer, if you are a matured cruiser and you've kind of done the resort cruises, you've done the one off the coast of South Africa, but you're looking for something that's now going to sort of be a little bit more intimate, something that's a little bit more bespoke, something that really you can get your teeth into. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're going to be taking a quick break, top up your margaritas or your champagne glass, and we'll be right back after this.
The latest news.
The biggest names.
The best destinations.
The hottest entertainment. This is the Sandton Times Hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour, and I'm chatting to Gaynor Galbraith Neill. She's the owner and CEO of Cruise Vacations, chatting about getting on a cruise ship, and it's something that we've been talking about extensively over the last couple of months, but we have mainly focused our attention on sort of the bigger, more involved resort ships where there's a lot going on for the kids, there's a lot going on, 17 different restaurants and all kinds of different itineraries. In this instance, we're now chatting about something that's a bit more premium, luxurious, different. We touched on some of the Explorer ships, and Gaynor, the Explorer category as a concept has really been getting a lot of momentum. I see a lot of people, especially who are avid cruisers, sort of turning their backs on the sort of all-you-can-drink margarita bar and, the sushi teppanyaki experience on the bigger ships and saying, well, you know what, I'm prepared to almost take on a little bit more grit and put on my beanie and my 3 K-way jackets and suck it up and get on a rubber dinghy and go see emperor penguins marching across the ice. And a lot of these itineraries are often not guaranteed.
No, so it actually works it's an incredible, the expedition market is growing exponentially, and I agree with you. You probably find it's people that have done, that ticked off all the big hitters, if you like, and they want to do something that's a little different. The world, we're definitely getting more adventurous. And expedition, what's wonderful about it, and people don't realize, is it's a completely different experience. There's none of this dressing up for dinner, entertainment. They don't miss that on board. They still have lovely restaurants on board. You'll still have a pianist perhaps playing in the evening or some tunes if people want to have a little bit of a fun time at the end of a day exploring. But expedition, you're going to be accompanied by specialists. So scientists, specialists, geologists, specifically thinking of Antarctic as we speak, because that has been probably the fastest growing expedition destination of this year for us. So you are accompanied on that voyage with photographers, ornithologists, geologists, historians. They tap in on the Shackleton history of the area. And as you point out, they don't follow a set itinerary. So you have a start point and an end point. Obviously, there is a choice with Silver Sea Cruises whether or not you want to earn your stripes and sail the Drake Passage. You can actually fly into King George Island in the South Shetlands to avoid sailing the Drake, although I feel personally you should earn your stripes. And then you arrive at the peninsula, and then there is no set itinerary because they are monitoring weather conditions permanently. Obviously, ice and winds and everything change. And once you're on the peninsula, they've got a series of landing sites, and they know where the rookeries are, which breed of penguin you might find, humpback whales, different bird life. So for wildlife fanatics, it's wonderful. But I was there 2 years ago, and it is the most magical experience, all in with the beautiful icebergs, the snow, the landings, and the Zodiac pilot, I think is the correct term. They actually train, all the expedition crew are trained Zodiac pilots, which means that when you are going off on the rubber ducky or Zodiac, the pilot driving it is a specialist or a scientist, so they can, extract the best experience. It really is, it's not inexpensive, but my advice to anyone is if you have the means to do it, I think it's something that should be done in a lifetime. That's my take on it.
For those people who are not ready to cruise in the footsteps of Sir Ernest Shackleton, there are other options as well. And those people might be saying, well, I don't know if I'm really ready to take on any kind of ship. Would you say that river cruises are maybe a better option to get your feet wet, for lack of a better phrasing? Because rivers tend to be a little bit more quieter, and you also do end up having a little bit more sight of land. You're not sort of in the middle of the Pacific, hoping to see an island at some point.
Sure. Look, I'm going to be very honest with you. I often say to people, the only similarity between a river cruise and an ocean cruise is the word cruise. It's a very, very different style of holiday again, but it's a wonderful way. Now, particularly, I'm gonna focus on Europe here because that tends to be the most popular. It's a beautiful way to see these magical little cities all around Europe, sailing up the Rhine or the Danube, and you literally, the ship pulls in alongside in the middle of a town. You get off and perhaps get on one of the e-bikes and go for a little explore or go on a wonderful tour. So if you were to think of, for example, a coach tour around Europe, and people are getting on and off a coach and in and out and taking your baggage and having to check in and out of hotels, you take all of that away, but you get the same experience of, doing a trip around Europe, if that makes sense. So the unpack once, it's a bit of a cliche in the cruise industry, but it is true. You get on board these ships and sailing the Danube and the Rhine. I've done both of them. It's like being in a fairy tale, really. And even more so for us that we benefit from such lovely weather here, that we're not scared of a cold weather holiday quite often. The Christmas markets of Europe is another thing that's very, very popular. And go across to Germany or that part of Europe and visit the Christmas markets from one town to another. So it's a lovely way to travel, very different to ocean cruising. I wouldn't even say it's an introduction to ocean cruising. It's a completely different experience, really, but it's still something quite special and a great way to explore.
Are you finding that the South African cruise market and those who are embarking on these cruises are making it more of a special occasion experience where they're celebrating an anniversary, honeymoon, maybe a significant milestone in their life? Or are people saying, well, you know what, actually, I'm keen to switch the way I do things and I want to make this part of a regular sort of annual holiday mix?
I think it's a good mix of both. With the celebration stuff, we often find sort of multi-generational groups traveling together to celebrate an occasion. It is a wonderful way. It's a wonderful honeymoon. It's a wonderful anniversary, a wonderful significant birthday. So we do get a lot of those guests, but we're finding, I think especially because we're the smaller ships and some of the destinations that we visit, as I mentioned before, a lot of people have already done the big hitters. Avid travelers have done all the big hitters. Now they're looking for something a little bit different, something Instagrammable, something that they, where very few people have been. And that's what we're finding, this kind of, people that want to explore lesser known places, both expedition and classic. One of the key advantages, and I always point this out, is however many people you're traveling as part of a group, or just even a couple traveling together, or a couple of friends, or even on your own. The beauty of it is there's so many different interest levels in these itineraries. So, for example, if somebody is, I'm going to give you a very good example, actually, is the Monte Carlo Grand Prix voyage next year with Silversea. It sails France and Italy, and they've got a lot of places of historical interest that you can visit. They've got some active activities. I think there's some hiking and some scenic spots that people can hike to, see wildlife. There's also a very strong culinary focus on that voyage. I know that it visits, as part of the itinerary, it visits Valencia, and they, stuff with all the oranges and farms and olive farms. But then we have a Grand Prix package. So let's say, for example, husband and wife traveling together. The husband is an avid Grand Prix supporter, and he wants to go off and do the Monte Carlo Grand Prix. His partner or wife could be off doing a culinary experience or another tour, or so it's multi-interest levels, which is also good, which means that you can travel together, but everybody's sort of needs and interests are met, all part of one holiday, if that makes sense.
Well, listen, it sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, I can't imagine that's not going to be a hot seller. And what a great combination to be able to do food, sightseeing, and Formula One in such an iconic space. I mean, it just sounds incredible. I was actually going to ask you, as we go into 2025, what other sort of noteworthy things are on the horizon for you in terms of your portfolio? I mean, any new ships coming online, any new itineraries that look really exciting?
We're just actually launching, believe it or not, we're launching into the 2026 and early 27 programs. There's a lot of fantastic destinations that we're doing. We're focusing a lot on our expedition, a lot on Galapagos at the moment. We've got a bespoke ship down there, the Silver Origin, which was actually launched in 2020, I believe. And Galapagos Islands, we're seeing gaining a bit of attention. The Mediterranean is always a hot hitter from South Africa, and it's a long season. It runs pretty much from April right through to November these days. So we've got all the sort of the usual ones that we do, but a lot of focus, a lot of days. I think it's over 900 destinations around the globe that we're doing. So we're excited about 2025. We're excited about the growth in expedition and river. Vietnam and Cambodia, we've got some beautiful itineraries. We like I say, we literally cover 7 continents and 900 destinations on seven continents. So there's a lot of exciting, a lot to look forward to.
Well, if any of that has whet your appetite and has maybe sparked your interest in getting on a ship and maybe exploring some of these, especially exotic places, the places that most people probably will never be able to see or never be able to get to in a lifetime, well, I'm going to put Cruise Vacations details up on the website, and it's been such a pleasure chatting to Gaynor Galbraith Neill, who's the owner and CEO of Cruise Vacations right here in Bryanston, award-winning, and I'm sure you'll be in good hands if you're looking to sit down with somebody and plan your next cruise. Gaynor, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you so much for hosting us. It's been great chatting about something we're very passionate about, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Tremendous. Well, it's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick break and move the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
Back for more?
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
As we get into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, don't forget that if you caught something interesting, intriguing, you want to get some more details about some of the things we've discussed in the last hour, well, don't forget you can head on to the website www.sandtontimes.co.za, and you can get all the detailed show notes on the website. So as many of you know who go onto the website regularly to check these things, there's more links, there's more highlights, there's more things to read, and you don't have to stress about listening and trying to take notes at the same time. I know a lot of people like listening to the show and browsing the website at the same time, which is also quite cool because then you can kind of follow along as you read. But also don't forget you can connect on the social media accounts at Sandton Times and feel free to be part of the conversation there. Well, a December highlight in Sandton is about to join us on the show, and that is Sipho Hotstix Mabuse. He's going to be doing a show at the Theatre on the Square from the 10th to the 15th of December 2024. It's called The Journey Continues by Sipho Hotstix Mabuse, and I'm thrilled to have him join me on the line. Sipho, good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to your listeners as well. Wow, Sandton Times, whoa.
Sipho, it's equally as exciting to have you here, a legend in South Africa's music scene, for some of your remarkable hits that you've had playing out over the decades, but also unbelievably talented musician. And you're going to be joined by other talented jazz musicians for the show. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Well, this whole journey started in Soweto, at the Soweto Theatre some time ago, and I just felt that I needed to navigate and approach the music differently to what the people know. I've invited, for instance, an Indian sitar player and a tabla player. And of course, I'm inviting my young daughter who's at Sacred Heart College and my son to come and join me as singers. They'll be doing their sets with me. And this is one of the, continuity of that journey.
So like a real family affair.
Yes, it's a family affair and a friends affair as well. But I'm more excited even more about the sitar player because I've always loved the sitar. The first time I had the sitar was through the Beatles. There was a song called Norwegian Wood where George Harrison was playing the sitar. And this would have been the first song that I performed, as a young 15-year-old musician at high school. So I've always continued on this love for the, exotic music. And the sitar represents that kind of exotic music. It
does add a special something exotic to the sound. I'm just thinking of a song now, if my ears tuned correctly. I think it's called Lebanese Blonde by Thievery Corporation that starts off with that distinctive sitar sound. And it just gives it sort of like a very oriental, very Far East kind of vibe, and it's a really special kind of instrument.
Absolutely, people, we've never really exposed ourselves to some of the most exotic sounds that the world has to offer. I recently recorded, in fact, not recently, about 20 years ago, I recorded a song called Tababusiu. This I recorded with a musician from Lesotho, from the villages of Lesotho. These are some of the things that I consider the journey that I always explore and find all these exotic sounds that I feel I can incorporate into the music that I do. Perhaps that's the reason that has kept me going for a number of years.
Well, a number of years. I think it's been about 50 years that you've been doing this, and 20 years does feel like the other day when you've been going at it for so long. But tell me, how does that influence your set list, having all these years to reflect on? Has that sort of played into what you're going to be performing in Sandton?
Alex, I always feel that for us to sustain ourselves beyond a particular era, we need to consider ourselves as an inventive people. If you don't reinvent ourselves, then we become stagnant. The idea of being into a commercial space where we don't transcend the commercial space, then we find ourselves not being able to proceed beyond what the people know of us. I know a lot of people would love to hear me play Burnout, but you can imagine Burnout was recorded 40 years ago. Wow. But then what happens after that? I have always felt that there's more to music than just one single song that makes everybody loves you. Those that love the stuff that I do will always be, conscious and probably be critical to what are the other things that I'm able to do in music. So I've always tried to be inventive, and I'm reinventing myself continuously into different space of music. People consider me a jazz musician. Am I a jazz musician? Not at all, but I do get dabbled into jazz and I can play jazz, so people will always be finding it strange that I'm doing all this kind of music, and while they know this music that they always hear from you, but there's this other music that I do. And this show in particular will be highlighting some of the things that I do in music.
Well, I guess that's always the big balance, right? It's people coming for those big hits, and they are obviously so iconic because people are still listening to them, like you said, 40 years later. And at the same time, for you also
Yes.
to have that chance to kind of say, well, I want to explore a different part of my artistry and a different sound that I'm, and finding that balance to keep everyone happy must be tough.
Absolutely, Alex. You couldn't have said it correctly. You know, I recently had a show at the Unlimited Basement, and this audience that was there was actually surprised that I was actually doing such deep jazz. But then eventually I did burn out, and of course the response was just as overwhelming, because suddenly they were hearing the songs that they've known and the songs that they've loved. And but it's also about educating people about, how far one can go musically. And I do hope and appreciate the fact that I've managed to navigate this very difficult balance of ensuring that sustainability.
Might it be a time to see a 2024 remix of Burnout? I don't know if there's an Amapiano take on it, or I don't know what other angle you might do with it. But have you sort of been tempted?
Well, I had been approached by a number of these guys, and I've said, well, let's put it out there and make it as competitive as possible with a young piano artist who feel that they can do it differently. Well, it could be an honor for me, for young people to, even with Kwaito, there's quite a number of them who were doing Kwaito and came to me and said, look, would love to do Jive Soweto, would love to do Shikisha, would love to do Burnout, in our new style. And I would say, guys, it's all music out there. We've listened to people like Bach, we've listened to, Winston, and we've always reinvented the music so that it sounds like today. So if you guys are able to do the same, please go ahead. By all means, I can only be honored for you guys to do the same thing for me.
Yeah, I'd love to see some of the talented South African musicians we have. I was also thinking Max Hurrell, Goldfish. I mean, if they had to sample some of your tracks that have been around for years and sort of bring a new angle to it, I think it would be quite something and quite spectacular. So the challenge is out there for them to do that. I mean, you've touched on your children now getting involved in the show, also being part of it. Is this part of your legacy to inspire younger generations of musicians, not just your own children, but also other youngsters that are saying, you know what, I want to be the next Sipho, Hotstix, Mabuse. How do I do it? How do I get involved?
Most definitely. It's just that, the most fortunate part is that I did not have to push them into it. They just love themselves doing these things. And every time they go to school, I see them leading concerts and performing at high school and leading songs and so on. It's particularly my son, and suddenly he's got this band that he's working with. And even though I had pushed him to get an education, which I'm very proud of, and I say, look, however much you want to be a musician, you must always understand that education is very important. And fortunately, they're all performing as, students from the high schools, which they attend respectively. But the talent, I think I always consider myself more a hard worker, but I think my children are more talented than I am. I mean, I have my daughter in England. She is in fact, when they are all together and they all start singing, I marvel at what it is that I've given to life of music.
Amazing. Wow. Do you think that they've got an easier time breaking into the music business than maybe you did 50 years ago?
I always say to them, it's not as easy as they think. It's the most difficult. It's a very treacherous trajectory for them. They mustn't always believe because their dad has worked out. I had been a very hardworking musician all my life. I don't know if the opportunities for them currently would present themselves such that things would be easier for them. They must always expect that there's going to be competitive space. There are competitions out there where they'll be meeting their peers who are just as talented. It's up to them to navigate and find their way through and see how they create their own success through this.
Amazing.
Yes, of course, there'll always be this consideration that these are Hotstix's kids, and obviously to give them leverage over above many of them. But I always say to them, guys, you're on your own out there. If you want to do this thing, well, do not rely very much on daddy's success and think that it's going to happen for you.
Well, listen, tough. It's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, on the other hand, there's huge expectations. I mean, we were chatting to Gilly Apter, I think it was last week on the show, and she was saying, she's been on Netflix, she's been on Showmax, and every time she gets introduced as a Netflix comedian, there's this massive expectation that you're going to be competing with Chris Rock, etc. Sometimes she says to them, look, don't even mention it, because my own talent has to shine. And I think it's very much the same thing with you, where your kids have to not just live in your shadows or live in your sunlight, but also sort of make their own mark in the music industry.
Absolutely. And this is what I always tell them. I said, there's nothing that says, your careers are going to be as successful simply because you are Sipho Hotstix's kids. You have to work your way through. You have to be in that competitive. You have to be in that world where your peers are going to judge you by how you've navigated yourself into their central space, not about whose children you are.
Well, let's come back to the show that's happening in Sandton. Why did you decide to have it at the Theatre on the Square?
I loved the intimacy of the theatre. Actually, when someone invited me, apparently they'd had a show there, and the response was incredible. So I went to Daphne and I said, can you show me the theatre? Yes, it's a small theatre. It's not a big theatre, but the intimacy, this acoustics, the look and the feel of the venue is different to when one is outside, doing all these major festivals and so on. And I've invited some, prominent people to come through, and people are looking forward to coming to the theatre. And I'm really I love the intimacy. At times we always believe that it's always about the big venues where we perform. But it's also very important that you could actually have a performance within a home, with 50 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you end up with 300 people in a theater, or 200 people for that matter, and it depends on how you deliver for those people, that is going to make a difference. And the Theatre on the Square for me is that perfect venue that I'm really looking forward to dish out the best of what I'm able to do.
I think for the real music aficionados, that's exactly it. I remember seeing Mike and the Mechanics at the Blues Room at Village Walk when it was still around. Also a tiny venue. I think we must have been about 100 people, if that. And to see also a live performance in an intimate setting like that is just the greatest thing.
You saw Mike and the Mechanics?
Yeah, can you believe it? Unbelievable. It was. I
want to say I hate you, but I love you, Alex.
But let me tell you, that was an experience and a half. And it was one of those evenings, that you don't plan, and you end up being there and you're thinking, wow, this is going to be something I'm going to be telling my kids about one day. But that was quite special in such a small, intimate venue. The greatest opportunity right now as well. The journey continues with Sipho Hotstix Mabuse at the Theatre on the Square, 10 to 15 December. We'll put all the details up, including the ticketing details, etc., up on the website. So if you want to go along and see this, some great jazz. He's got Aziz Joshi and Shanjit Tilok joining him as well.
Yes.
Some Oriental sounds, some African sounds, and of course, maybe some Burnout as well. But Sipho, it's been amazing having you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you so much, Alex, and to your listeners as well. Thank you so much.
The best of talk and music in 1 hour. This is the Sandton Times Hour.
And as 2024 wraps up, the Sandton Times Hour reflects on a year of unparalleled growth, global adventures, and rich storytelling that brought you closer to the pulse of Sandton and, of course, beyond the borders of Sandton. Celebrating 2 years on Mix 93.8, this show reached an incredible milestone and also solidified its place for, I'd like to think, a place that you'd like to listen to at least every single week, be it locally or internationally. And to give you some numbers, well, this year the show earned a recognition on multiple fronts. It was nominated for Podcast of the Year at the African Podcast and Voice Awards, and also landed a third place on the prestigious FeedSpot's 30 Best South African Podcasts to Listen to. And our listeners also grew. If I look at the Spotify Wrapped for this year, 22% increase in listeners, 37% growth in streams, 26% more followers, and impressively, 93% of our audience discovered the show for the first time this year, which is exciting. And we had 126 unique guests featured on the Sandton Times Hour this year across 42 episodes. So that's 42 hours that were produced, which is just staggering if you think about it. So 2024 took the Sandton Times Hour on the road, literally and figuratively. We went to Miami, Orlando, Dubai, Madrid, Hong Kong, Venice, Verona, Milan, Rome, Florence, Bodrum, Cape Town, and many more destinations, both locally and internationally. Back home, the Sandton Times delivered a deep dive into local developments as well. We chatted to Business Leadership South Africa CEO Busisiwe Mabuse, reflecting on the Sona this year. We had Hamza Faruqi, who chatted to us about Pret a Manger coming to South Africa. We had Discovery Bank's Hilton Kellner, who presented Spend Trend 24, amongst many other business leaders that we had on the show. Also, we chatted about some exciting new ventures, including Sandton's new LXX Santos shopping destination. We also embraced the creative arts. We chatted to South African Eurovision hopeful Filipa, who competed at Festival de Cancao in Portugal. We had Dr. Terry Dubrow from Botched on E across Africa on the show. We had conversations with illusionists Brendan Peel and Lee Lau, which was really great. Then we also had a deep dive into the launch of Monster Energy Ultra Fantasy Ruby Red, Mark Pink Taylor, who designed that particular can. We also had Elle on the show, who designed the side of a new cruise ship that's coming up in 2026. We also had comedy with Stuart Taylor, who chatted about the Laugh Africa Comedy Festival, Jason and Nicholas Goliath, who shared their Happiness Economy show with us. Then locally, we had some culinary highlights as well. We had Chef Genghis Khan triumph at the South African Restaurant Awards. We had Chef Earl, who chatted to us about Aikido. We had the judges from MasterChef. We had all kinds of incredible dining conversations on the show as well. Then on the entrepreneurship front, we had Clive Butko of Conducive Capital chatting to us about tech investments in Africa. Gracia Bampile talk about Hort Africa and sharing the journey in African fashion. Then also Graham Beck, Cellar Master Pierre de Klerk celebrated International Cup Classique Day on the show with us. And also the year saw the return of a beloved segment like Great African Mysteries with John Robbie. And also I had a chat to ChatGPT and that voice and got connected with a bit of AI banter. And also we had Miss South Africa 2024, Mia Leroux, on the show as well, and also South African Olympian Tatiana Schumacher, and she chatted to us just after her Olympic win. It has been the most incredible show. Thank you for listening and being loyal listeners. You make all of this possible, and you make all of this worthwhile. And with that, it's all we have time for the show this week on the Sandton Times Hour. As always, available on all leading podcast platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Podcast Party, and so many other leading digital audio platforms. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @Sandton Times. And visit the website, www.sandtontimes.co.za. And feel free to send through your questions, your comments, your feedback, some ideas for 2025 as we start putting our heads together to see how we make the show bigger and better next year. Thank you to all my guests who made the effort to be on the show this year, and also the teamwork that goes into putting all of this together. As always, thank you for listening. And with that, the 2024 show comes to a close. Let's do it all again and more next year.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.